YouTube intros aren't cool anymore, which is incredibly convenient to those of us who are in a perpetual state of having an identity crisis. I could tell you that I'm animal_man_, but what does that tell you about me exactly other than I'm somebody who stubbornly sticks to his crappy design decisions, even if they're so painfully generic that you have to purposefully butcher them in order to maintain the illusion of originality? I could tell you that I'm a gamer, but that's kind of boring, especially if you're already a gamer, and plus, if you don't play video games, that's the perfect opportunity for you to assume that I spend all of my free time playing video games in my mother's basement, which is not true, obviously. My mother doesn't have a basement. I could tell you that I'm a post-evangelical Christian, but if you're not into religion, then you're probably very much not interested, and I also probably would have to spend time explaining that I'm the kind of Christian that doesn't hate gay people, and if you are into religion, then I get to play the role of the heretic, and I have to explain why it is that I don't hate gay people. It's kind of a lot of work either way. But then there's one other label that I could give myself upon introduction, and that is the label of being an artist. But there is one major issue with calling myself an artist, and that is that every single time I refer to myself as an artist, my hands involuntarily rise up to make air quotes. Who knows why that could be? Maybe it has something to do with the fact that I don't feel like I qualify for the title. I believe that many doctors of the internet and self-help gurus recognize this as one of the many symptoms of the elusive imposter syndrome, a condition that everybody loves to hear about and throw around these days. It's like a pat on the head when a YouTuber you're watching at 2 in the morning says that you have imposter syndrome. And everybody has it now. All the cool influencers that you look up to have imposter syndrome, so if you want to be cool like them, you better get yourself some as well. I gotta say though, imposter syndrome is great. Everyone always talks about how awful it is, but it's not that bad. You get to give yourself plenty of great excuses to not pursue whatever your hopes and dreams are. All the while listening to all of your friends tell you over and over again that you're actually super cool and talented and that you just have to believe in yourself and you can make anything happen. It's a great way to squeeze out the last bit of serotonin out of your intestines. The truth is, I don't want to be the one to call myself an artist. I want to abuse all my friends' kindness and have them think of me as an artist and remind me of that over and over again. Or better yet, have a bunch of internet strangers call me an artist. That's a lot less effort on my part. It may not solve the chronic air quote issue that pops up whenever I have the thought of alleviating my own identity crisis, but it's easier to be mysterious and aimless. So yeah, I don't like calling myself an artist, but I have better excuses than just jumping on the bandwagon of hating on self-help gurus. I'll give you 3 fantastic excuses right now. The first reason I hate calling myself an artist is that I feel like if someone were to hear me say that I'm an artist, they would assume that I'm saying that I'm good at being an artist. Why do you do that? I, for one, think that people who are bad at making art are still artists. I think that you can be a bad artist if you want to. But it doesn't really matter what I think, right? I have to take into consideration what other people think when they hear the word. I feel like I can't really call myself an artist, because if I do, then people around me will assume that I'm saying that I'm good at making art. And I hate that, because I hate most of my art. So if I'm not a good artist, I feel like I should just not mention that I'm an artist, because I don't feel like I can expend the energy trying to justify the claim. I don't think that I can justify that claim, honestly, so I won't bother making the assertion. The second reason I hate calling myself an artist is that I absolutely hate talking about my art. I hate it so much. It might be difficult for me to talk about my art because it's difficult for me to talk about something that I'm working on without coming off as marketing for something that I'm working on. Like, if an acquaintance asked me what I was doing this last week and I responded honestly with, "Oh, yeah, I was working on a script for a video essay that I've been working on," they will respond politely, pretending to be interested, but you know deep down that they're thinking to themselves, "Wow, really had to sneak that one in there, buddy. Nice self-promotion there, buckaroon. You really just had to let me know that you were working on a video essay so that you could get me to ask you what your YouTube channel is so that you could get another subscriber, didn't you?" So instead of answering the question, "What did you do this weekend?" honestly, I usually try to think of anything else that I did in the weekend besides making the video essay, in part because anytime I say anything about anything that I'm working on, there is always that possibility that it can be interpreted as marketing. And it always feels like whenever I'm doing anything that can be interpreted as marketing, I'm decreasing the value of whatever it is that I'm making for any second that I spend trying to get somebody to give it the time of day. I don't want people to discover my art because I told them to look at it. I want people to discover my art naturally because the algorithmic gods decided that they should see it someday. So that way, their experience with my creation is not tainted with their socially awkward experience with me, the artist, there is a part of me that I want to share through my creations. And I feel like that part of me that I want to share is best experienced without any more of me. You should just have like that one part of me and nothing else for the best experience. I don't want to be a distraction for my own creation, so I just won't tell you about it and hope that you stumble into it somehow anyway. The third reason that I hate calling myself an artist is a word that many struggling artists are thoroughly familiar with, and that is the infamous P word. I don't want to be pretentious. As a kid, being pretentious was a quality that I didn't realize that I had. Then, as I got older, I started to notice that sort of quality in other people's work, and then I started to notice it in my work. And nowadays, my potentiometer is one of the primary driving factors that determine what I make, how I make it, and how I share it. And calling myself an artist just feels inherently pretentious. I don't know how I could call myself an artist without setting off everyone's potentiometers. I think it's impossible, actually. A comparison that I like to draw, just as an example for something related to this, is the title of a philosopher. One thing that I feel like I've noticed about most philosophers is that most of the time, philosophers don't call themselves a philosopher. Philosophers get labeled the title philosopher by other people who hear what they have to say and judge their words as philosopher worthy. I could be wrong about this, but I don't think that Aristotle or like Socrates or whoever was going around telling everybody, oh yeah, I'm a philosopher. Again, I might be wrong here, but I feel like the title of philosopher is something that you earn through social capital by sharing your thoughts that other people deem to be insightful. Not because you decided that you were super deep, bro. Of course you would think that about your own thoughts, right? I feel like the title of being an artist kind of operates in a similar-ish way. Like, if I say that I'm an artist, that feels exponentially more pretentious than somebody else calling me an artist. I really need your validation to help me circumnavigate this insecurity that I have, is what I'm trying to say. I don't want to be seen as pretentious. I want to make things that are legitimately deep, bro. But the problem is that I can't be the person to judge if the things that I make are legitimately deep, bro. Because of course I would think that about something that I made, right? And if you hear me call myself an artist, you would probably assume that I think that my own creations are deep, bro. Because if I didn't, I probably wouldn't call it art. And you probably think that because you think that artists have to be good at making art, which ties back to reason one. And you thinking that is one of the sources of me hating talking about my own art, which ties it back to reason two. And then you thinking that is part of the fuel that ignites my fear of being pretentious in the first place, which ties it all back to reason three. I'm starting to get the feeling that you're the real problem with me here. So, with all of that said, as I've just demonstrated to you empirically, I think that we can all agree that I should not call myself an artist, because my arms are getting tired and I can feel these two fingers start to creak with every bend. But that's totally fine. Who needs that title? I have plenty of great alternatives. Let me share a few with you right now. For the longest time, I went with the label of aspiring artist. This is a very helpful title for people like me. It's kind of like communicating to others that I like to make stuff, but if you don't like the stuff that I make, that's because I'm still aspiring. I'm not quite there yet, so you can feel free to pat me on the back and tell me that I'll get somewhere someday. I give this title an 8 out of 10. Sometimes I like to just tell people that I'm a person who likes to make things, which kind of waters down what I make to the degree that you can't really detect any pretentiousness in it. I'm just a guy who makes things, man. It's not like that big a deal or anything. And hey, if it's just a thing that I made, feel free to lower your standards a bit for what it is that I'm working on. I don't know, it's still kind of it's a bit long for a title. I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. If I'm feeling extra edgy and extra 14 years old on a particular day, I might say that I'm cursed with creativity. That one really hits you in the soul, doesn't it? And the fact that I see it as a curse communicates to you that I'm burdened by the artistic process, while also giving me the victim privileges of being a tortured artist. And this one gives me a touch of mysteriousness too, which I hear the ladies love. 7 out of 10. I could call myself a content creator, but I just don't really like the word content, as I've discussed in the past. It just feels so soulless to me. And I mean, soulless is kind of a good thing if your goal is to try and avoid coming off as pretentious. But I just don't want people to think that I'm grinding through a creatively bankrupt content mill. 3 out of 10. Free spirit? Are you kidding me? If I acknowledge that I have a spirit at all, I'm being pretentious. Get that out of here. 1 out of 10. Artsy fartsy person. Now see, I like this one, because Artsy is kind of like discount artist. It's a little more wishy-washy, which kind of allows me to keep the pretentiousness in a way. It's also like a very vague sort of title, which makes it very difficult for people to make harder presumptions on what I do or what I make or how I view what I make. So I'd give this one a 9 out of 10. Another option that I could go with is artist. Like, without the air quotes. And don't get me wrong, I'm fully aware of the fact that I'm the only person who's gatekeeping myself out of this title. I'm sure that you've been yelling at this video this entire time, like, why is this so difficult for you? Just call yourself an artist, bro! But you should understand that I have very high standards for myself. I can't just let myself be deluded into believing whatever I feel like believing. There has to be evidence of some kind that I'm an artist. Don't get me wrong, I'm no, like, Reddit atheist or anything like that, but I like a healthy amount of empiricism in my life. But the issue is approaching issues like identity and art with empiricism is inherently problematic because nobody has a firm definition of what an artist should be in the first place. So what kind of evidence would suffice? Well, I make YouTube videos. That's art, right? I wrote the script, I picked how I would express myself, I edited the video. I've spent a great deal of my time pouring my heart into many different videos over the past 12 years of my life. Granted, a good amount of those videos are really just discount Exerbia, or discount Joseph Anderson, or discount Savannah Brown, or discount Lonnie, or discount Super Skarmory, but there's a good amount of me in each of those projects. What about music? If I make music, is that evidence? You know, I spent my 1 year that I had in college skipping parties and homework so that I could focus on making a SoundCloud album in LMMS. I've made a decent amount of music since then. Granted, I've only ever felt comfortable sharing 2 of them publicly, but does that count as evidence? I did martial arts and performing arts for a good chunk of my life. Those have arts in the name. Surely that's evidence of me being an artist, I've dabbled in poetry as a means of closure and as a way to process things. I've written lyrics. I've attempted to write books. Books with pictures, mind you. You get double the art points if you make books with pictures. Going through my childhood, I remember spending so much of my free time as a kid making mazes. I did a few mazes as a kid and I enjoyed doing them, and I realized that they were very easy to make. All you needed was a pen and paper and you could create your own mazes. Creating mazes as a 3-year-old, it wasn't art to me back then. I didn't care if I was an artist back then, and that was just okay. I was just a being who made mazes, and I didn't have to think about it beyond that. The Sandman was much nicer to me back then. I was a lot nicer to me back then. And now things are different, I guess. I can only look back and wonder if that was evidence of me being an artist. I need to know. I'm struggling. I'd like to know who I am. I'd like to know what it is that I'm striving for exactly. I want to know if what I'm striving for is even attainable, and if it is, do I actually want to attain it? I'd like to know if my quarter-life crisis is going to last so long that it extends directly into my half-life crisis. I'd like to be on my own team. I'm struggling. I'm struggling. And I'm the cause of my own struggling. And I will not stop gatekeeping myself until my standards are met. And my standards are high. And my standards are high because my artistic endeavors are some of the only things that I feel like I can use to justify my pitiful existence. And no self-help guru out there is going to do much of a good job of convincing me that I don't need to justify my own existence, because that belief is axiomatic to me. Because if I don't treat myself as somebody who needs to justify his own existence, how can I be sure that I won't spend the few decades that I have with the exceedingly rare gift of conscious experience carelessly? And so I'm trapped here, asking myself for evidence, with no solid criteria for what even constitutes as evidence. And maybe I'll play that game until I'm dead. I'm not even moving the goalpost. The goalpost is just a ghost. It's a vapor. Is this the curse of creativity that 14-year-old me was referencing? What is supposed to come first? The identity of being an artist, or the art? The chicken or the egg? For a good long while, I guess I've held that the egg is what comes first. I mean, it always felt like all the artists that I look up to just kind of started making stuff, and then eventually they felt comfortable calling themselves an artist. And so I figured I'd do the same thing. I'd just start making stuff, and eventually I'd feel comfortable calling myself an artist. So I made music, but I never felt comfortable calling myself a musician. I wrote essays, but I never felt comfortable calling myself a writer. I edited videos, but I never felt comfortable calling myself a video editor. Maybe if I just make like 100 more things, then I'll reach the threshold and I'll finally feel comfortable in my own skin. Maybe if I just make 100 more things, I can finally break the paradox. Maybe not. But I'm at a point in my life where I need to make a change in my perspective or something. I'm still in the process of trying to understand how my own brain works so that I can work my way towards being something approximating the best version of myself. And I really feel pressure to start being the best version of myself as soon as possible because I'm like 25, which is like 87 in internet years. I don't want to spend a huge chunk of my life fighting against myself, only to figure out how I work a couple decades later when I could have been the best version of myself that entire time. I need to get myself figured out as soon as possible. I'm struggling. Man, that'd be a great place to end the video, wouldn't it? Could you imagine? Sounds like such a solemn conclusion, leaving the audience on the edge of their seats like, what's gonna happen next to him? Haha, you've watched the video this far. You're clearly invested in me now. No resolution for this video, just thought that I'd share my completely unique experience that no other human has ever experienced before as an interesting case study. Feel free to write encouraging comments down below while I wring out the rest of the serotonin from my intestines. Nah, yeah, we're not gonna end the video like that. I have a couple of patch notes that I'd like to go over to end this video. I'm making some changes. It's going to be called the chicken came first update. The latest patch of animal_man_ that maybe will help me be me better. I don't know. It's a rough patch. Who knows what's going to happen. It's a bit of a controversial update to the player base of 1, but it's purely experimental. So we're just going to give it a try for a bit. First change we're making in an attempt to make me feel more comfortable in my role on this gosh forsaken rock is you. We're changing you. You need to get your crap together. If you hear me call myself an artist and you make assumptions about me based on that title alone, that's a you problem now. It doesn't matter if those assumptions are good assumptions or bad assumptions. I don't care. That's not true. I do care, but I care 70% less. We're downgrading to 70% on the caring there. Or at least I'm pretending to. I guess I'll try and get God to buff your ability to make better assumptions or delude you into thinking that I'm actually good at making art or delude me into thinking that I'm actually good at making art or all three. I'm also going to be buffing my ability to talk about my own art going forward. So that, you know, if somebody were to ask me how my weekend was, I don't have to pretend that the most interesting part of my weekend was air frying chicken nuggets from Food Line. We're only going to be adding about a 20% increase to my ability to talk about my own art to make sure that I don't go overboard, but it's going to get out there, I guess. Next up, we're buffing my perception of the social status of pretentiousness to acceptable if you're self-aware about it. And I guess we'll see how that goes. So there's this meme that my friend Cairo shared with me about being cringe a while ago. I'm sure you've already seen it.
Perhaps I am cringe, but that makes me free.
Truly a fantastic meme. Good job, internet. We're going to be adding a new pretentious version of this meme. Perhaps I am pretentious, but that is what makes me free. So like around a year ago, I wrote a poem to an old friend group that I decided to leave behind. And one of my friends saw the poem and they told me in a conversation that we had about it afterwards that the poem was just the right amount of pretentiousness, which is probably the greatest compliment I've ever received in my life. That's how I want to live my life, okay? With just the right amount of pretentiousness. Because I am pretentious, but I am free. Finally, I'm nerfing myself so that I can buff myself. I'm nerfing myself so that I can get out of my own way. My creative process is an endless battle against my motivation to do anything that isn't doing what I know that I should be pursuing. There's obnoxious perfectionism, which leads to avoidance, which could just be laziness. And all of this together spirals into a lack of respect for myself that kills my art. I need to become less so that my art can become more. I don't have a lot of respect for myself. And there's 3 primary reasons for that, as far as I can tell. I grew up in a household with some questionable theology. I was genuinely a terrible human being as a kid growing up, and I still hate myself for how I was when I was younger. But more importantly, I'm incapable of keeping promises to myself. I can't finish projects when I want to. I can't reach goals that I should be perfectly capable of reaching. I know that I could be so much more, and knowing that deep down just kills me. And so in an attempt to demand a little bit more respect of myself, I want to assert myself as the role that I know full well that I need to fulfill. I am an artist. That is who I am. And I just thought that you should know that about me. And I just thought that I should know that about me too.